Good morning. An Easter reflection for us today. For this year, our gospel reading is from the Gospel of Matthew for Easter. And it begins with this from the passage of chapter 28. After the Sabbath at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to go look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow, and the guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. I'll just pause from there. We're probably very familiar with the rest of the passage of Mary Magdalene and the other Mary being approached by the angel saying, "Don't be afraid," and being told to go share the story with the other disciples. And I think we're probably familiar with that story and that account of those first women, the first witnesses. But I'd like us to ponder the other folks that were mentioned there, those guards. Because this is what comes to mind, is that in the Gospel of Matthew, the only one that talks about these guards that were sent to guard the tomb. And they were at the request of the high priest and the Sanhedrin and others. They went to Pilate and asked for guards to guard the tomb because of this threat of Jesus saying he would come back, or that maybe his body would be stolen or something. And Pilate eventually said, "You have guards." And it appears to be that he sent those guards, which would be Roman guards, to guard the tomb. And I ponder what these Roman guards thought about all of this even before they arrived. They were Roman. They might have been in the city, but they wouldn't have been part of what was really going on in the Jewish mindset and the Jewish thought pattern and the Jewish story. They would have been in their barracks and on the edges of what's going on, maybe hearing rumors and bits and pieces, but not most of them probably paying much attention to the Jewish side of this conversation and the history and scripture and prophecy and everything else. They were simply guards. And Pilate says to one of his soldiers, one of his generals, one of his commanders, centurions, and says, send a guard. So he sends a guard. And their job is to guard the tomb, and they would do that very, very well. But to what purpose, to what end? Were they told somebody might come and steal the body? Did they even know who it was? Were they part of that group that might have been around and watched and seen and participated with the crucifixion of Jesus? But Pilate had hundreds and hundreds of soldiers. These could have been nothing more than soldiers from some other detachment, some other place, sent to go guard a tomb and not know why. We don't know. It doesn't say anything about these soldiers. But they arrive there, and they're waiting, and they're probably doing their duty as best they can, and a bit bored, but they were very diligent. And there's a long saga of how these Roman soldiers and what they were responsible for and how well trained they were. And maybe they were ready. Maybe they were ready for some folks to come and try to steal a body from a tomb. But I don't think they were ready for an angel to appear. That's what it says here, is they were so afraid, they fell and they were as if dead. Was that they fainted? Was that if they curled up and fell on the ground and said, sometimes we see in those movies of some kind, play dead? Did they listen? Did they hear the angel speak to Mary and share this message of the risen Jesus? Did they hear that, if they were still there? Or did they run away before that happened? What exactly is the timing? But if they were there and they heard this, what did it mean to them? Especially if they didn't know the story of Jesus, anything more than maybe a rumor that there was this wandering, traveling rabbi that was trouble. But in so doing, they then went back. And later on in the chapter, just a little ways further, it mentions that they went back and they shared the story. And they said what had happened to them, and they were bribed to not tell this to anyone, to take this money and simply say some folks came and stole this body from the tomb. And they did, and they went on their way. What did they think about all of this? What was their story? And what might have been later on as eventually the story of Jesus grows and it spreads and it changes? And maybe they learn more about it afterwards rather than beforehand. And they say, that I know something about that. I heard about that. I was there for that. But in the midst of it is the confusion. In the midst of it, there's things they don't know. How much times does that happen in our lives? There are things that we do not know. We do not know what's going on. Something simply happens around us. We have no explanation for it. We do not understand it. We're afraid. And we simply try to make the best of the situation. But we wish somebody might help us understand. Maybe we hope and dream for that phrase of "do not be afraid" that is said in a way that we can believe. And that's what we have, is we have the rest of the story for Easter. But those Roman soldiers probably didn't. And there's many other folks that probably don't. And right now, in the time of this very strange period of isolation and coronavirus and pandemic and epidemic, that for some folks is so poignant and so painful and filled with personal tragedy in many places and many people. And others seem to be totally unaffected. It's somewhere else, it's someplace else, it's for some other people, or it's maybe not even real. And we come from different perspectives, different experiences, different ways of seeing the exact same situation. Maybe one thought here is, how do we have grace and mercy for each other in the midst of something like this when we don't all have the same perspective, we don't all have the same understanding. Our experience of this is not the same. And realizing that simply where we are and who we are and our experience frames us. But it's not the only experience out there. But having grace and mercy for others and trying to at least walk with them through it. Maybe share with them. If they're folks that are anxious, how do we share our hope and our faith with them? And if there's folks that are not anxious and to them it simply is not something to be concerned about, well, not to be judgmental either, but to walk with them and perhaps simply try to help them understand a different way of seeing. But walk with humility and walk with grace and walk with mercy, because that's what God calls us to do, and that's who God calls us to be as we proclaim ourselves followers of Christ. In just a few short verses after this passage is the Great Commission that Jesus gives to his disciples. Go and make disciples. How do we do that? How do we do that? By sharing the gospel and sharing the grace and mercy of God that is given to us and shown to us in the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus.